At the end of the chapters, they have some review questions, and we really haven't spent a whole lot of time looking at the review questions, but I think on this chapter especially, these are some good exercises to look at to see if we really understand how loops are working and stuff. So again, I'm using this is the 8th edition of the C++ programming program design, including data structures book. All right, I'm going to look at number 42 on page 338. Number 42 on 338. The author had this same exercise on previous editions, but it might have been a different number. So, but I think I've got the code here. I would just have to kind of double check it. So the question is, to learn how nested for loops work, do a walkthrough of the following program segments and determine in each case the exact output. Okay, and so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these little exercises here. And so, how would you do something like this if you were to see this on a quiz or an exam or something, which you will? So it's kind of hard to just look at a code, especially loop code, and just kind of keep track of everything in your head. Okay? So what I suggest is writing down all the variables that you are dealing with, and also and update them as you trace through the code. So the name of this game basically is you're the compiler. So you have to trace through the statements just like the computer does it. The computer just does it really fast, right? And then also keep track of what your output is. So normally I would draw this on the board, but since I'm trying to do a video of it, I think I can just do this maybe in Notepad. I'm not a big fan of Windows 8, but here's Notepad. All right, so let's take a look at the code for part A. So let's see, I think this is it right here. And again, with a question like this, you wouldn't have a compiler in front of you where you type in the code, right? You have to trace through it yourself. So let's see if that's the same as what the book has. Yeah. All right, so what's the output of that? So how would you do that? So I would keep track of my variables here, and just on scratch paper or whatever. And so what variables do we have? We have I, we have J, and then down here I might keep track of what my output is, because that's what I'm really trying to figure out. And so how would this work? So if you just take a look at the loop setup, we have a nested for loop, right? A loop inside of a loop. We have an outer loop that's controlled by I, and the inner loop is controlled by J. And I've got the only indel in there is that cout indel, right? That's after the inner loop, but still inside the outer loop. So how many times does the outer loop go through, just by looking at it? Remember how a for loop works? You've got your initialization part first, and then you got your test, and then your update. So at the beginning, it's going to do whatever the initialization says, and then it's going to test every time. And at the end of the loop, it's going to do whatever is in the update part. Right? So it's a counter-controlled loop, right? So I starts off at 1, goes up by 1 every time, and then the test is while I is less than or equal to 5. So that will go through 5 times, right? Assuming there's nothing else in the loop anywhere that messes with the value of I. So the values of I will be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. When I becomes 6, the loop is false and X is out. Right? So what I'm going to get there, the outer loop's going to go through 5 times, and because we have a cout indel and that's the only indel, we're going to get 5 different lines of something. Okay? And so for every 1 time through the outer loop, we're going to go through this inner loop a certain number of times. So let's just kind of trace through it. And a lot of times on questions like this, you start seeing a pattern. So I starts off at 1, right? I'll just say I is equal to 1. Okay, so 1 is less than 5, so that's true. So we go inside the outer loop, and j starts off at 1. All right, and it goes up by 1 as well, right? So the inner loop will go through 5 times for every 1 time through the outer loop. And we said the outer loop goes through 5 times. So the inner loop is going to end up going through 5 times 5, 25 times total, right? All right, so j is 1, and 1 is less than or equal to 5, so that's true. So what does it do? Inside the loop, it outputs in a field width of 3 the value of I, which I is what? 1, so you get like 2 spaces and then a 1, technically. And then j becomes 2. So I'll just kind of keep track of where I am. And then 2 is less than 5, so that's true. So it goes through. We're going to get 5 of 5 ones, right? J is 3, and so forth, right? And every time it goes through, we're going to get a 1 down there. 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And then when j becomes 6, 6 is less than or equal to 5 is false. So we exit out, and the next thing after the inner loop is an indel, so it goes down to the next line. And then that's 1 pass through the outer loop, and then the next time I is equal to 2. 2 is still less than or equal to 5, so it's going to repeat this whole entire process, right? J gets reset to 1, and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and finally it becomes 6 and it's false. And every time it goes through the inner loop, what is it going to output? It's going to output whatever I is, which I is 2, right? This time around. Like that. So you can probably already start seeing the pattern. When I is 3, we'll get 3, 3, 3, 3, and so forth. When I is 4, we get 4s. And when I is 5, you'll get that. And then when I becomes 6, what happens? 6 is less than or equal to 5 is false, so we exit out of the loop. Does that make sense? So we're going to go ahead and test it and see. So this is the dev compiler. I'll just compile and run that. Oh, wait, I have too many things. And actually, let me put this in my special folder that I have set up for my virus checker to not pay attention to. Let's see. This went to downloads, I think, didn't it? Loop review. And I've still got something not commented out. It's all this stuff. All right. So there you go. Make sense? So the compiler, that's what the computer's doing. It's just doing it a lot faster than I can do it. All right, and so that's how these things work. All right, how about the next one? I would do it the same way. Let me find that one, part B. So I'm going to comment this out. So here's B, I believe. No, that's not B. Yes, it is. Okay, so what would that one do? So it works the same way. So I've got an I and a J and my output, right? So again, the outer loop is just like what we had before. It goes through 5 times, right? It keeps count. And I've got an indel there. So I'm going to get 5 different lines of something, okay? The question is what? So let's trace through some of it. So I starts off at 1. 1 is less than 5. But then this time the inner loop is different, right? So what does J start off at? J is equal to I plus 1, right? So this time J is going to start off at 2. 1 plus 1. And then the test is J is less than or equal to 5, and it's going to go up by 1. So this time my output is going to be, in a field with a 5, the value of J, not I. So we're going to get like 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 2, right? And then J becomes 3. It's going up by 1. 3 is still less than 5, so we go through here again. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to get a 3. And then J is 4. 4 is still less than 5. I don't know why they did a field width of 5 there. J is equal to 5. 5 is still equal to 5, so we still go through here. Okay. And then J becomes 6. 6 is less than or equal to 5 is false, right? So we exit out of the inner loop, and then the next line says C out indel, so we go down to the next line. So that's one pass through the outer loop. So let's see what it does next. So next, I gets incremented to 2. Okay. And so what do you have now? 2 is still less than 5. So J is going to start over at what? This time J starts at 2 plus 1, so it's 3, right? So J doesn't start over 1 again, or 2 or whatever. It's going to start at 3. And so this time, what are we going to get? A 3. Then it's going to get incremented to 4. Right? So we'll get a 4. You see what's going on probably. And then a 5, and then it's false when it's 6, and our output on that line is going to be what? 4, 5, and then it's going to go down the next line, right? So we go through the inner loop one less time than we did the previous outer loop iteration. So what happens next? I becomes 3. What does J start off at? 4. 3 plus 1 is 4. And so you can see that it'll go through when J is 4 and 5, but it'll exit when it's 6. Like that. No, it'll be that, right? And then when I is 4, J starts off at what? 5. And so we output a 5. And then J becomes 6, and our loop is false. And then we go down the next line. I is 5. 5 is still equal to 5. So we go inside the outer loop and then hit the inner loop. And J gets set to 5 plus 1, which is 6. Right? And 6 is less than or equal to 5 is false. So we don't go inside the inner loop at all this time, right? And then technically we go down to the next line, and then I becomes 6, and 6 is less than or equal to 5 is false. So we exit out. So you'll see how that works. Let's test it. So there you go. So the computer just does it really fast. So does that make sense, what we're doing here? I have 5 minutes. Y'all want to do... Do you want to do part D or E? Let's do part D. So part D, looks like this. So this one's a little bit different, but it works the same way. So I've got an I and a J and my output. I got a couple constants here, M and N. They're both 10, right? So anywhere you see an M or an N, you just plug in 10, right? And so look at that outer loop. I is equal to 1, I plus plus, and I is less than or equal to 10. So it's going to go through 10 times, right? The outer loop is going to go through 10 times, and every time it goes through, it'll do a separate line because that's the only indel that I have there. So what happens with the inner loop? So let's take a look. So the inner loop, J starts off at 1. The test is J is less than or equal to N, which is 10, J plus plus. So the inner loop is going to go through 10 times as well. So what's going to get output there? We're going to output M times I minus 1 plus J. So what does that come out to be? Well, if you take a look at it, I is 1, right now. So 1 minus 1 is 0. 0 times 10 is 0. And so this whole, every time through this first iteration of the outer loop, it's always going to be doing 0 plus whatever J is, if that makes sense. So when J is 1, it's going to be 0 plus 1 in a field width of 3. When J is 2, it'll be 0 plus 2, 0 plus 3, 4, and so forth, because it goes through 10 times, right? Actually, it's that. And again, the values of J are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and so forth. So what happens when I is 2? Well, again, we go inside the outer loop. And this time, this part is going to be 2 minus 1, which is 1. 1 times 10 is 10. So it's always going to be 10 plus whatever J is. So what do you think we're going to get on the second line here? So 10 plus 1 is 11. 10 plus 2 is 12. 10 plus 3, and so forth, right? So it's really just keeping count. 10 plus 10. And then again, the values of J are going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And so you can probably start seeing a pattern even now. The third time through the outer loop, we're talking about 3 minus 1, which is 2. 2 times 10 is 20. So yes, we're going to get 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30, right? And so this will continue, right? So I'm not going to do all these rows, but that will continue on. I just put dot, dot, dot. And what's going to be the last row? 10, right? When I is 10, that'll be the last time through the outer loop, because 10 is less than or equal to 10. And so that'll be 10 minus 1, 9, right? 9 times 10 is 90. So the last row is going to have all the 90s, like 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 8, 99, and finally 100. It takes up the whole field width, right? So let's see if that's right. So there you go. Make sense? So for every one time through the outer loop, usually what happens is the inner loop's going to go through multiple times, but that's not always the case, right? So anyway, so hopefully that gets you thinking a little bit about loops. Next time we can try to finish this if we need to. Part E is a little bit more complicated, but it's not too bad. It's just instead of having one inner loop, there's 3 different inner loops. But they're not, the inner loops aren't nested inside of each other. It's not like a loop inside of a loop inside of a loop. So anyway, next week, I'm thinking Tuesday we might do a few more of these exercises. I think these are good to look at. I know they might be a little boring, but I think it's good to really understand what's going on there. And then on Thursday, we'll do the quiz for Chapter 5, okay? Quiz for Chapter 5. I think that'll be better than trying to rush it in on Tuesday. All right, so I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Don't forget about your state program, your program 2. Make sure that you're working on that. And maybe, we'll see, maybe we'll have a little time on Tuesday for me to answer questions about that if you have any. All right, have a good weekend.